Good morning everyone and welcome to the webinar for Enforcement Agency Services DPS 953. In this webinar we will be talking about social value. So just to introduce ourselves, I'm Sara Jarvis. I'm the category buyer for corporate and financial services here at YPO, and I'm joined by Ed Moore, the social value manager from Capita Group. So I'm just going to go through some housekeeping. You have all joined this webinar in listening mode only. However, you do have access to type questions throughout the webinar. We will provide a Q&A document and share with everyone after the webinar all answers to the questions raised. So today we're going to cover the background of the DPS, explain the meaning of social value, how social value fits within enforcement, how to maximise social value, how we can measure social value, and the unintentional benefits of social value. So firstly, I'd just like to do a quick overview of who YPO is. YPO was established 45 years ago, and we have a wide range of customers within the public sector. We're 100% publicly owned by 13 local authorities, which means all our profits go back into our public sector customers. We have a large choice of available leading UK suppliers, so we can provide you with everything you could possibly need to successfully run your organisation. So the Enforcement DPS. So the Enforcement Agency Services DPS includes the collection of all debt types which a contracting authority may have a requirement to collect, plus other services an enforcement agent can provide. Examples of debt types include council tax, parking fines, non-domestic stroke business rates, road traffic fines, sundry debt, housing benefit overpayments, social care debt and university accommodation fees. Examples of other services debt collections examples of other services include advice and consultancy, evictions, but please note these are just examples that I have mentioned. Authorities must have the appropriate authority and orders to allow enforcement agents to carry out the service. Examples include liability orders, writ of control or repossession orders. All suppliers appointed onto the Enforcement DPS have registered enforcement officers and/or High Court enforcement officers and comply with the Taking Control of Goods Regulations 2013, Taking Control of Good Fees Regulations 2014 and the Certification of Enforcement Agents Regulations 2014. So what is a DPS? So DPS stands for Dynamic Purchasing System. It's an electronic system established to purchase goods, works or services. The DPS will remain open for the life of the contract and new suppliers can join at any time subject to meeting the selection criteria and mandatory requirements. Awarded suppliers will then participate in the customer's further competition. Currently, there are 15 suppliers awarded onto the DPS, and if you want to know who these suppliers are, if you go onto the YPO website under Enforcement Agency Services DPS, we have listed all the awarded suppliers on there. So what does YPO do for you? So the support YPO offers, we offer guidance to contracting authorities when they're writing their further competition. So what we provide is a further competition template document for you to complete, sample questions and specifications, suggested timescales, terms and conditions. Once you've wrote your further competition, we can then check your further competition and go back and provide guidance. We can facilitate your further competition through our e-procurement portal. So that means that we'll manage all clarifications. Once your further competition's closed, we'll download the submissions and then we'll send them over to you electronically. Once you've evaluated, we can then provide successful and unsuccessful letter templates for you. Once you've done your letters, we can check your letters against your evaluation scores and then we can award it for you. If anybody's got any queries or they want to discuss anything, if you get in contact with me, my contact details are right at the end on the slide. So now I'm going to pass over to Ed, who's going to discuss the social value aspect.
Hi, good morning. So as Sarah said, my name's Ed. I work for Capita Enforcement Group as a social value manager. I just want to really run through some of the basics around social value and how it fits within enforcement. So it's been almost 7 years since the Social Value Act was implemented in January 2013. Much has changed since then, but still many organisations are struggling to implement the requirements of the Act. The good news is that real leadership is emerging across all sectors, with innovators delivering more and better value for their communities. Across the UK, we're seeing an increased local spend, more jobs for local people, better skills, less crime, healthier communities, and more volunteering. Social value is often referred to as community benefits or corporate responsibility, and the different titles, including the fact that the Social Value Act is officially called the Public Services (brackets Social Value Act of 2012, probably also contributes towards the confusion around the subject. So, the introduction of the Public Services Social Value Act of 2012 requires all local authorities to have regard to economic, social, environmental well-being in connection with public service contracts and for connected purposes. So this essentially means that for anyone tendering for anything with a value of £181,302, and I'm not entirely sure where that figure came from, they need to have consideration for social value within the tender. Therefore, in order to fulfil the delivery of social value, there must be a recognition that social value is about change, whether that's positive or negative, and it is about recognising those changes and being honest and open about how much of the change is down to the social value project against how much change would have happened regardless of that project. When we talk about change, most people see enforcement action as causing a negative change to people's lives purely through the nature of the work. This is why we have to approach social value commitments and projects in a transparent and measurable way in order to show the positive impact we can have within the communities that we work within. With social value being needed to be considered for contracts with a value of £181,302, this leaves a lot of room for interpretation. The word considered leaves it open for individual opinion as to whether it is essential or not. And whilst many local authorities now have social value policies in order to enhance their purchasing, there are still some that are uncertain whether or not they can consider social value on contracts which are generally not involving any spend from local authorities themselves. The other key issue with this social value consideration within enforcement is that some local authorities are unsure how to ask for what has been offered in the tender process. This uncertainty has led to bargaining in some instances, which risks the social value element not being able to be reported on thoroughly. This also has the potential for local authorities to measure the social value offering purely based around the monetary value rather than the benefit, regardless of the cost. However, social value is important not just as a tender winning exercise within enforcement, but as it is with industry as a whole. We should want to add value to society and not just because we're being asked to do so. So to maximise social value, some key points. We need to think of the bigger picture. Think of the environmental issues, long-term local strategies, local demographic and human and economic geography with changes on the high street and manufacturing, etc. Don't base social value on monetary value alone. Don't just look at the pound notes for today. Think about the lifetime of the project and the ongoing changes to people's lives it will make. True social value could benefit society for years beyond the contract terms. Implement projects and employment opportunities that will be sustainable and beneficial for the long term, not just to service today's requirements. Don't have a shopping list approach. Be flexible to suggestions. Meet with your enforcement agents and discuss the projects that they feel will be beneficial. They should have experts that can provide case studies for genuine projects within similar areas. A shopping list approach can give a blinkered approach and therefore a short-term outcome only. Think outside the box and be open to suggestions. Only believe what can be realistically delivered when choosing suppliers. Choose carefully when potential suppliers are promising the earth. They may not be capable of delivering it. Measure and report to show all stakeholders what is being delivered, showing real life results and positive changes to the communities which can be measured and aren't necessarily based upon the monetary spend. And finally, don't be afraid to challenge if a supplier is not delivering their commitments. They may have won the tender based upon what they have offered, so make sure it happens. How can we accurately measure social value? So, the easiest way for me to explain this is to tell a story about little Billy and the £10,000 climbing frame. And this is just a story, but it does show the knock-on effect of true social value. Little Billy used to walk to school every day with his parents. They walked through the park and past the rusty old climbing frame that little Billy was never allowed to play on because his parents deemed it unsafe. One day, a new enforcement company took over running the council tax arrears collection for the local authority, and as part of their social value commitment, they agreed to remove and replace the old climbing frame, which cost them £10,000. The knock-on effect of this, though, was huge. Little Billy suddenly was allowed to play with his friends on the new safe climbing frame and even started leaving home earlier in the morning to get 10 minutes playtime in before school. This fresh air and exercise meant that Billy was no longer staring at a screen or playing on his Xbox before school. He was so keen to go and play in the park. The school commented to Billy's parents that his concentration had improved and he had more energy throughout the day. This was having a positive effect on his school results, and Billy was now in the top grade for most classes. A few years later, Billy graduated school with good results and was able to apply for careers he always thought would be out of his league. Everyone was proud, and Billy earned considerably more money than he knew what to do with. Billy eventually bought his parents' home and invested in renovating it, replacing windows, doors and painting the outside. His neighbours recognised how good Billy's property looked, and they also started to spend money on their own homes. Before long, coffee shops and nail bars were opening up, and all the locals drank craft beers and ate artisan bread. Kirsty and Phil turned up and called it an up-and-coming area, and house prices soared. And this is all because of the £10,000 climbing frame. However, proving this was all because of the £10,000 climbing frame is almost impossible. Billy could have just grown up and started enjoying school more, but we have all seen the reports about less screen time and more exercise and fresh air benefiting children. This is a story, but it does help to show how actually the right social value project will benefit society for years to come, regardless of the monetary value. Another example would be in many tenders look at the recruitment of apprentices as a way of showing good social value. However, an apprentice costs approximately £18,000 a year. But if that apprentice was previously not in employment, education or training and was therefore potentially claiming support through benefits or universal credit, then actually by employing that person, the £18,000 salary has also saved the authority a large sum, potentially doubling that £18,000 monetary value in real terms. Through delivering social value, we've also noted an unintentional benefit. Traditionally, enforcement agencies have had good relationships with local authority, and the local authorities have had good relationships with the enforcement agencies and the third sector advice agencies. But there has been a solid wall between the enforcement agencies and third sector advice agencies. By delivering social value into communities, we've been able to work closely with both local and national charities and advice agencies, which has helped us knock through the barriers that we were that were dividing us. In doing this, we've been able to discuss what the third sector would like to see us change within the industry, and we have accommodated wherever possible, giving us a much more positive relationship and a trust that we are doing the right thing. We've also recognised through working and delivering sustainable projects that we need to look at our own approach regarding sustainability in the environment. This has led us to various improvements such as carbon offsetting, ultra low and low emission fleets, a social value policy that is adhered to and available for clients to see, and also helping other local authority partners to do the same. There's some useful links here, Social Value International, Social Value Portal, and the National Social Value Task Force. Hope you found the webinar useful, and I'll happily attempt to answer any questions that you care to send through.
So we'd just like to thank you for joining us on today's webinar. If anybody has any questions, you can either raise them now, or you could also send an email to enforcementAgencyServices@ypo.co.uk, or you can give me a call on 07481 295 284. Thank you for listening.